Welcome everyone to today's panel on writing standout application essays. I am thrilled to have you all here today and for this event to be part of Leland's MBA week. Just a reminder of where we are in the week. So today is Wednesday. This is our last session of the day, writing standout application essays. We have 5 more workshops and panels like this one lined up for tomorrow. So we'd love to have as many of you join as possible. If you'd like to join, then Erica is going to be sharing some links in the chat where you can sign up. You're going to need to sign up for each session individually if you'd like to join. And again, we would love to have you as we look forward to the conclusion of MBA week tomorrow. Today, we've got some fantastic content lined up. We're going to start with a brief welcome and introductions as I introduce myself, as well as our panelists. And then the bulk of our time is going to be spent discussing application essays and how to write a standard application. We're going to spend about 50 minutes going through questions related to that part of the application before we wrap up. Joining us today, we also have a few members of the Leland team. I am actually a coach on the platform, but we also have Erica joining us, who's the head of experience, and Amelia, who leads content, and Josh is here as well. So they'll be engaging in the chat, dropping links, answering questions. So as we're going, if a question occurs to you, please post it in the chat, and Erica, Amelia, and Josh will get to that straight away. So I'd love to introduce myself and then pass it to each of my panelists to introduce themselves. Excuse me. There we go. So I am currently a business school student at HBS, where I just finished my first year and have 1 more year to go. It's been a fantastic experience so far. Prior to business school, I spent 2 years as a consultant at McKinsey & Company, and then 3 years at a tech startup in the Bay Area. And I've been an admissions coach with Leland coming up on 2 years now, which is pretty surreal to realize. I've gotten to work with dozens of clients across both traditional and deferred MBA programs. And my particular expertise is in essay composition and editing. Many clients like to describe my superpower as being able to condense responses down to word count. So give me a 1,400-word essay, and I promise I'll get it down to 900 words without sacrificing anything that matters. So that's a little bit about me and my background. Soa, I'm going to kick it to you, and then we'll just go in order here. Ben, you can follow Soa, and then we'll have Dion introduce herself.
Thanks, Kevin. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Soa Silly. I am, as of last week, officially a Stanford GSB alum. But my claim to fame while there was serving as our past president. Background for me. So I began my career as a teacher. I was teaching English at a university in Hong Kong for a year. That was, I guess, the 3rd country I've taught English in. And then went into consulting. So did traditional consulting for a few years and then switched over to our innovation hub space, where I did more prototyping, product design, kind of getting things from 0 to 0.5 or 0.75. And also outside of work was working for early stage startup. Most recently, I've also worked in venture capital, investing in early stage ventures, and I'm now founding my own startup. But for me, my bottom line has always been storytelling. It's really been the basis of how I've liked to approach life and career. Undergrad, my background's in psychology, economics, and creative writing. And so I've always loved people, why they do things, why they make the choices that they do. And when I'm working with my clients, we always try to go deeper into what is your why? How do you figure out what is your specific why? What makes you stand out as a candidate? And how do we get to the specificity that essay writing allows? We'll go into it later in the conversation today, but really essays are this incredible opportunity to show yourself as a fully multidimensional person and make the admissions committee feel like you're not just a commodity, you are the special person that you are. And that's what we work to get to. So happy to go into the conversation later on, but I'll pass it on to them.
Yeah, and I would 100% double down on that point. I think the essay now more than ever is becoming really the core of the application, and it's just a super powerful way to communicate who you are in a compelling way. A little bit about me. I mean, I grew up in Queens, New York, so I always start with that. If anyone's from Queens, big shout out. But went to WashU for undergrad. I did philosophy, neuroscience, econ there. But honestly, ended up taking a ton of lit classes because I'm also kind of a writer at heart. After graduation, I worked at McKinsey for a little bit, but focused on actually mostly public sector and healthcare work. And then decided I wanted to do policy full time and moved over to the mayor's office under Rahm Emanuel on their policy team, but also got to kind of flex that writing muscle again, doing a lot of speech writing in a professional context, ghostwriting, op-eds, all that stuff I found to be just super exciting and rewarding and really where my wheelhouse was. And then after policy, went to GSB, similar to SOA, dabbled in VC, startup world. It was pretty wild being there during our mutual couple of years inside. But it ultimately led to, I think, a wonderful set of outcomes. Moved to New York, started my own consulting, private equity advising practice. So spent a little time doing that. But most recently, I feel like I found really what I'm supposed to be doing. Started this chess coaching business. And frankly, I'm writing a book on chess and chess for life and stuff. So it's been a really exciting pivot. But ultimately, I've really loved working with Leland for the past year and a half now, and have seen a number of people and now met a lot of folks that I've helped get into GSB and other schools. So it's been just a really exciting last year and a half, and love to talk all things essays and writing. Over to you, Dion. Dion, I think you're on mute.
Hi, thanks. I do admissions consulting full time. It's not a side gig. I've been doing it for more than 10 years. And you might wonder, why would I do this and how did I get into it? So first, I'm a big believer in the power of education. I was a first-gen college student, and I went to Stanford and majored in economics and communications with concentrations in journalism and sociology. I remember when I applied, I actually didn't know what I was doing, but it did work out. I returned to Stanford GSB again for my MBA, and post GSB have held roles in international marketing, communications, partner development, and love to travel. I've worked and lived in Asia, Europe, and of course, the US. So I think the two things that I really loved in helping, I guess literally hundreds of people apply is, as Soa mentioned and Ben mentioned, helping people to tell their story and put their best foot forward.
Fantastic. Thank you all for those introductions. I'm thrilled to have a panel of such heavy hitters here, everywhere from the young recent graduates and consultants to Dion, who's been in the industry for over 10 years at this point. So some amazing expertise that we've got here. We'd love to get to know you as well, you participants. We've got over 100 of you. So just pop in the chat, where are you dialing in from? What's something you're excited to learn about today? We'd love to hear from you. Okay, we've got Paul from Los Angeles. That's where I was born. California is close to my heart. Hey, Brooklyn, shout out. There we go. That one's for you, Ben. Seattle, Arizona, Nigeria. There we go. Tunde wants to navigate the GSB essay. It is a bit of a beast. Sao Paulo, Brazil. Bogota, Colombia, incredible. Okay, so quite the international audience, and with a lot of great questions focused on the essay. I'm going to briefly talk about Leland for those of you who are just getting to know Leland this week, and then we're going to dive into the expert panel. So what is Leland? Leland is the one-stop shop to reach your ambitious goals. And that means wherever you are in the process, whatever you want to achieve, whatever that ambitious goal is, Leland is your partner in that process, whether it's getting into your dream MBA program, landing a spot at a big 3 consulting company. And Leland has myriad offerings across the spectrum. I am a coach on Leland's platform. It's a coaching marketplace. So there are hundreds of coaches like me. And as a coach, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, working with individuals, helping them craft their MBA application. We also do a lot of group classes. I teach a group class on writing a standout HBS essay. My colleagues on the panel have also taught group classes. And Leland also recently released Leland Plus, which is a subscription that you can sign up for and get unlimited access to tons of incredible content, whether that be videos that coaches have posted, templates, worksheets, along with coaching discounts. So you can get special discounts if you want to work one-on-one with a coach. But ultimately, everything we do at Leland is about you. It's about the individuals that we get to meet and interact with and support through this platform. And this has been, without doubt, the highlight for me of being a coach on Leland, is being able to work with people like you and helping you reach your ambitious goals. On this slide, we have just a few of the hundreds and hundreds of people that Leland has helped. Many people on this slide I've gotten to know individually. And people really come to Leland to achieve their real life outcomes. So whatever you're wanting to achieve, I'm confident Leland can get you there. And fast forward to a year, I'd love to see some of the faces in this room on this slide. Okay, let's dispense with the introduction and dive right into the meat of it. We've got about a dozen questions here, and I am itching to hear the responses from our panelists. Let's start high level. So there are many components to an MBA application. You've got your resume, your letters of recommendation, short answer questions, right? All these different aspects. And I'm curious to know, let's start with you, Soa. What's your perspective on the role that essays play in the context of the broader application?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So essays honestly are one of the biggest opportunities to really just let the admissions committee know you for a fully dimensional person. When I'm working with my applicants, one thing we do is write down a list of the 5 to 6 things you want the outcome to remember about you. Whether it's maybe you care about social impact, maybe you have a financial background, maybe you're community-oriented, hardworking, whatever it is, whatever those 6 things are, cross-referencing those to the different components, resume, short answer, essay, whatever it is, and just making sure across the full application, you're having at least a couple opportunities to showcase each of those different relevant skills or things you want them to remember. So essays are a piece of your application. I always want to underscore it's always the full picture, not just that one component is the be all end all for any candidate, but they do give you this really special chance to demonstrate what's motivating you and your why. It's giving you that chance to connect the dots of your resume, of your life experiences, and show what were the things you learned at each of those different pivot points. What made you pivot in the first place? How did you take what you learned and carry that forward? How has that informed who you are today and where you want to go and where you want to be in the future? So it's really just this chance to color in who you are as a person, what your story is, and why business school will be a catalyst or an amplifier for whatever that goal is. And the more you can show the strides you've already taken towards that future goal, the better, because then your story will really come to life and they'll say, hey, this person's not just, the commodity of a million people who have the similar background. They are a specific person and this is their specific story. I want to help them and be a part of their story as well. So it's really a piece of it, but it really is your chance to tell the admissions committee who you are.
Absolutely, absolutely, Soa. And really, the essay is your only chance to connect on an individual personal level with the human that's going to be reading your application, right? And so, you have a whole application to showcase what you've done and what you've accomplished. And I totally agree with you. It's a mistake to not show in the essays how you've grown, how you've learned, who you are as an individual and as a person who has hopes and dreams. That's spot on. Ben and Dion, anything that either one of you would like to add to that?
I was going to add that I agree with everything that's said. I've read admissions for applications for Stanford. That's one of the reasons why I got into consulting. It is really hard when you're looking at hundreds of applications and you can only interview, much less accept a few. The essay is so crucial to giving the whole picture, as Soa has said. And in the ideal, in that first, let's say, first few paragraphs, you will have established an emotional connection with your reader. They will feel something. They're people too. They're not just a anonymous machine reading it.
Yeah, absolutely. So essay, super important component of the application if you didn't know that already, but perhaps an overlooked aspect is making sure that you connect emotionally with the human that's going to be reading it. So with that being said, knowing how important the essay is and the role that it plays in the application, what are some key elements of an essay that really stands out in the eyes of the admissions committee and will get the attention of the reader? So they stand out as the one or two in the 50, 100 applications that person is going to be reading. Ben, why don't you start with this one? And then Dion, I'd love to hear you follow up with your perspective, having been on the other side of the table.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's well phrased, and also, so your initial answer. I'm glad these things are recorded, because as somebody who's literally teaching a class on this, like, I don't think I could have said it better myself, and I've tried many times. So I will say that in terms of like what actually makes an MBA essay stand out, I would say in an introductory type way, in the beginning pieces of the essay, I think being cinematic and thinking about just general best practices of writing, like have a great hook. Say something memorable, put your thesis statement out there, and especially for a school like Stanford, which is asking you a question like, what matters most to you and why? Answer the damn question. Like, make sure that information is clearly in the essay in some form. And I think that orients the reader in a way that they don't have to read your whole essay guessing and trying to piece the puzzle together themselves. I think other things that stand out to me for the best written essays are they're kind of written with a humility and a nuance that honestly reflects the reality of the world that we live in. And it's not just like, hey, look what I did. It's, hey, this is the stumbling nature of life, and this is actually how it was for me. And these are the lessons that I took away. And I think that the capacity to articulate the mechanisms of the changes that happened in your life in a way that is genuinely humble, and in a way that isn't just about displaying the best parts of yourself. I think that honesty goes a long way, and it's something that can be felt through writing. So those are a couple things that come to mind in terms of a few maybe stylistic elements of a standout application essay.
I think your experience as a writer and an essayist is definitely shining through there in that answer. Dion, what would you add?
Ditto to everything that Ben said. I'll just describe some of the characteristics I think make a strong essay. One is that it should be very authentic. When you're writing, it can be more conversational in style. And the mindset is not, what am I going to write to impress someone about how smart or how good I'm at? But think, when you're planning your essay through writing it, how am I going to let this person really understand what keeps me up at night, what makes me excited, what gives me joy, how I bring impact? The second, I think, is, you probably heard this in high school English, but show, not tell. An essay, the examples, and oftentimes the exercise can be to use this behavioral interviewing STAR method, is really to describe not only what you've done, but why and how, and so what, and what were the lessons learned and the impact. I think for many people, they may feel nervous, understandably, about writing something wrong, but really the risk of blending in is far greater than probably the risk of standing out. You want to stand out. That is the goal. You want to be seen as a whole person. And I think one thing that people can do when they're writing is ask themselves, kind of using the 5 why method, is, why is this important? Why did I do this? And also from looking at the reader's perspective, like, so what? And I don't mean to be rude, but why did you care? Why should I care? Why should anyone care?
Fantastic. So some of those key elements that really stand out to me: authenticity, right? Humility, great word, cinematic, that Ben used, right? Having a catchy hook, answering the question, and including richness, including stories, showing, not telling, and more importantly, in terms of what you're showing how you've learned, showing how you've grown, showing how you've changed, and showing the logic and rationale behind the key decisions that you've made, and the kind of leader that you are, and why you are that leader, right? So how do you get there? That sounds, no offense to our panelists, but a little bit daunting and a little bit challenging to get there in one go. What role does self-reflection play in coming up with that skeleton of an essay, and particularly how can applicants convey their growth and development through their writing? So, do you want to start this one off?
Happy to. Yeah. Self-reflection is everything, honestly. The thing I always say is that if it feels, especially in your first really rough drafts, that you're writing in a diary entry, you're probably doing something right. When someone picks up your essay, they should, and who knows you really well, whether or not your name's on it, they should know that it's yours, because it is that deep into the core of who you are. And so when you're thinking about how do I approach this with self-reflection, just kind of going a little bit deeper behind those core application questions to say, okay, so yes, they're asking me for what is important to me, what matters to me, what do I want to do next? But really digging into what those reasons why are is key. Dion already mentioned this 5 whys exercise, so highly recommend anyone just do a quick Google search on that, but it really allows you to dig deeper into what are your core reasonings for those larger thematic things that you care about. And then to the part of the question where it's how do you effectively reflect on your experiences? This is something where there's a few different tools you can use to approach just getting to those core stories. One of which is to lists. So I'll have my applicants write down 2 lists, one of 5 stories that have really been key to their life, and one of 5 traits that are really aligned to them. Those stories can be self-sourced, or those traits can be self-sourced, or where the color really comes in is by tapping on a family member or tapping on a good friend who knows you and asking them, what are the 5 things you think about when you think about me? If they're really close to you and they actually know you, it can be really helpful just to see like, how do other people think about you? And then kind of cross compare that to what was on your list already. And this can kind of unlock some of those stories that you didn't even realize were as defining or as powerful in your life as they have been, and really kind of getting everything down on paper. Your first draft, really don't worry about word count at all. Just kind of like piece together the dots of your life and going back and trying to say, which of these stories are the most relevant for showing how I've grown and developed over time. That's really key to getting to the point of really defining those experiences. So thinking about those core traits, thinking about those key stories, and tapping into only a core network. This is not a quantity beats quality thing, only people who really, really know you well, to kind of see what else you might not have realized about yourself that really might be a huge part of you.
Right, so not just self-reflecting, but also leveraging the insight and experiences of those that are closest to you. Ben, do you have anything, or Dion, do either of you have anything you'd add to this question before we move on?
I think that was really well said.
Great. Then let's move on. So let's say you've done this self-reflection, you've talked to those who are closest with you, you have your 5 stories, you have your 5 traits. How do you then start drafting your essay? Ben, why don't you take the lead on this one, and how can you start to chip away at what feels like this very intimidating behemoth?
Yeah, I think the hardest part of the writing process is before anything's on a piece of paper. And so I think that the fastest way to break that is just to write anything. People are often, when they begin writing, they feel this like, they feel this need to create a big outline and to have the structure formulated. I can say having written things in so many different mediums, I would say like, just start anywhere. Start on page 43. Like, it doesn't matter. Pick your favorite part, the part that you feel like is the most likely thing that's going to end up in your essay. The thing that you're most passionate about, whatever it is. or that formative experience that you're like, this is just so me, this is so indicative of who I am as a human being, and was a critical juncture in my life. Just pick up a pen, or like, I actually personally always start writing like on a piece of paper. I find it to be a little bit more engaging. But write 100 words. Don't challenge yourself to have like the final 649 words for your Stanford What Matters Most essay. Don't feel like you have to write like a long-winded answer. Like, all of these things are just obstacles and advanced, sophisticated ways to procrastinate. I think high yield questions are things like, what are the biggest challenges you faced and what did you do about it? What are the biggest life lessons you've learned? Who are the most important people in your life? Where would you go if you had a year to play with and absolutely no downside? Like, there's a lot. These are not the magic questions, but there are many permutations of those questions that I think can draw out some of the best material that ends up forming the backbone of these essays.
Fantastic. And yeah, then once you've started answering those questions, then taking the 5 whys that Dion suggested, okay, those feel like your biggest challenges. Why are those the experiences that stand out to you, right? Dion, what would you add?
I actually do ask for more than 5 examples and 5 qualities. I do take a similar approach to what Soa mentioned. And what I like people to do, or I nudge them to do through pre-writing exercises, is come up with like a library of examples. And because you can say, these are the qualities that define me. That's what all my friends say, or that's what I want them to know. But you must be able to prove it through what you've actually done in life. And that's the power of the storytelling and the credible examples. And so what I encourage people to do, and I help them to do, is look at the application, all of the components, and allocate, if you will, the points of the stories across the different components. There's your resume, the application form, the letters of recommendations, the essays, the optional essays and statements. If you're applying to Stanford, there's quite a few. And look at these as, actually, it's an opportunity to show different aspects of yourself. You know, to paraphrase a quote of Mark Twain, you know, if this is a paraphrase, if I were a better writer, I would have written shorter. It's really hard to fit everything into Harvard's one essay. Stanford, for instance, gives you much more space to show the different aspects of you, and you should welcome it. Don't let the voice of judgment constrain you.
Dion, you mentioned the optional essays for Stanford, the GSB, and I'm going to go a little bit off script here, and let's just chat about those for a couple minutes. What's real here? Are those really optional? What's the advice that you give your clients when it comes to approaching those optional GSB essays?
Well, I advise my clients to take advantage of every opportunity to show how they've shown up in work, in their personal life, and therefore how they'll show up in school. They are optional. I do have a client, and she chose under short timeline not to do any of the optional statements for Stanford, and she was a double admit to Harvard and Stanford. However, for most people, I would recommend taking that opportunity. I mean, really, when you look at what is kind of like the gem that you have is your ability to show your impact. And so 3 of Stanford's optional statements have to do with examples of how you have had an impact. I also encourage people to answer how their background has influenced their life, and as appropriate, but sparingly, the optional statement that most all schools have about addressing any concerns or open questions.
Yes, and that optional essay, are there any additional, is there any additional context that we need on your background? Just to clarify, that was for those who are listening. Obviously, I know, Dion, you know what you're talking about. When Dion is saying the additional optional essays for Stanford, That's not the optional essay that I was talking about. So thank you for that
sorry,
response.
You're talking about the
No,
optional one that says about things we don't know about that you want to talk to us about.
you answered the question that I was asking, which
Okay.
is perfect. So with that, let's move forward. Many applicants have similar backgrounds or experiences, which can make it challenging to differentiate themselves. This question is about how applicants can find their unique selling points and leverage them in their essays to set themselves apart. So why don't you get us started on this one as a previous consultant? So a very common background.
Definitely. So yes, there's a lot of people who come from consulting and finance backgrounds, but the nice thing is no one is the same. And so I think actually a lot of the tools that have been discussed already on this call, like those 5 whys, digging in really deep, or like the so what did you specifically learn? How does this specifically impact you and how you move through the world, what your worldview is? That all makes you a unique person. And so really the way of standing out is by going deeper. You don't necessarily need to have, like maybe you did a lot of really incredible things, but I think like going deeper and just trying to get really specific is great. That and a bit more tactically in terms of how you approach the stories that you do tell in your resume or kind of beyond that, finding ways of showing traction towards that goal that you want to have. It's been mentioned before, but part of the believability of telling a story is by showing that you've already made strides towards whatever that goal is. If you want to work in an ed tech startup in the future, have you already done some part-time work working for an education nonprofit? Have you already in your consulting world found ways of learning from industry experts? Like how can you kind of show the traction that you've made towards whatever that goal is? And also go deep into why that goal or that dream is important to you based off of your life experiences, based off of those moments and pivot points that have led you to where you are today and to where you want to go.
I love that answer. In my mind, and what I tell my clients is there are kind of 2 ways you can think about standing out as an applicant. One is just having something about your background or having some experience that is super unique and that is rare in an applicant. That's not very common, right? I didn't feel like I was one of those applicants. I feel like the majority of the clients I work with, they don't necessarily have something about them that is particularly unique. There may be something if they dig deep enough, but there is a second way that anyone can stand out, regardless of your background. And that's through how you approach your application and how you present yourself through your essay, right? Having an essay that is very deep and very vulnerable and very honest and very authentic. Those are the types of things that are going to make your essay and therefore your overall application pop to someone who's reading it and be memorable when they're reading dozens and dozens and dozens of these at a time. So let's move on to the next question here. The infamous "Why this school" essay. I think it's hilarious that every school but Harvard has some form of this question in their application. And yes, when you're applying to MBA programs, you basically have to pretend. It's a lot like dating, right? You have to pretend that they are your one true and only school that you must get into. Ben, as an experienced GSB alum and someone who's coached lots of GSB alumni, this is obviously a big component of the Stanford 2-part essay. How do you recommend approaching this one?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, and I'd be hard pressed to tell you that it's one that I completely answered with perfection when I was going through this process. I think one mental step that you can take is just like forget that you have to somehow convince each school. They know you're applying to multiple schools, almost certainly. I think what matters is articulate to each school a compelling value proposition about what you're going to contribute to that school and what are the biggest things about that school that you're excited to take away. And if you do that, regardless of the fact that you're applying to other schools, I think the school should and do fairly find that compelling. What I think was kind of awesome about some of the better wide GSB essays that I've seen, and frankly accidentally ended up being what was decent about my own, was that the stuff that I wrote about happened. Like it all took place. Like I was like, I want to join this, and this. I'm going to run this thing. I hope, I'm going to get started working on ideas in this space, and like did those things. So if that happens to be, if your narrative is around, like, let's say, I think Soa mentioned the example of like building a startup in the education space or building a solution to help solve XYZ problem. Well, look at the school, see what resources exist at that school that would help you achieve that goal, and then include them in that essay. It's also worth reaching out to alumni who work in that space so that you can actually inform your essay with conversations, so that you take yourself from sounding like an applicant to sounding like an alumni yourself. So those are my biggest tips in terms of how to approach this school essay.
Yeah, that last one is so important, right? Actually talking to students, either current students or alumni, it will get you those second and third order details that you're not going to be able to find from a Google search or a quick browse of the website. And that also stands out, right? Dion, what would you add to that answer?
I think the exercise and I take my clients through, and the structure of the answer is first kind of recap in maybe just one sentence, what is your vision for what you want to do and why? That's important because you want to get me, the admissions committee, excited about helping you achieve your dream. The second part would be then, why am I positioned? Why am I going to credibly achieve my goals? And then here's the part that speaks to the admissions. I can achieve this wonderful goal, this meaningful goal, if you help me succeed. And this is what I need to do and learn and experience while I'm in business school. And then you need to make that specific to that school. That proves that you have a plan, that you're not just applying to school because what? Because you're expected to in your job, or you're tired of your job. And it tells them why you really want to go to their school. The last part of the question, even though the question is often phrased as, why do you want to go to this school? I sometimes reference a famous John F. Kennedy quote, which is, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So it's not explicitly stated in the question, but you also need to, recognize that when you are taking up a precious seat, you are also going to contribute to the richness and the diversity of the class, whether it's clubs, study tours, internships, mentorships, and you need to help the admissions person understand how you will show up and how you will contribute. It's a great opportunity to share what your plan is.
I love that structure, that three-part approach, Dion, of, what's that big thing you're going to accomplish? And then I almost think of Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, right? What's that big thing you're going to accomplish? What are you going to take from the school to help you accomplish that? And then what are you going to give to the school as well? And making sure that that's a balance. Let's move on here to word count. So there's a lot about you as a person. You have these post-MBA goals you're trying to achieve. You have these past experiences. You're trying to convey career goals and aspirations, trying to do all of this effectively. And then the school says, okay, great, 600 words, 900 words, right? How can you concisely articulate some of these big ideas and thoughts in a way that hits the word count? So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, and I'm very much a proponent for writing way over the word count and then cutting back down, just to kind of see what that core part of it is. And so with that word count, right, like as we're trying to think through what are those key moments, really try to keep the language itself simple. I think sometimes there's this propensity to use really flowery, really big words for the sake of sounding, super smart in whatever way. It's fine. It's better to be clear. It's better to be straightforward. It's better to kind of use what's called, I guess, in some books, weekend language, and just make sure they fully understand what you're trying to say, rather than kind of use that more flowery language. If you can say something in a 20-word sentence, try to say it in a 7-word sentence and see if the idea itself can still stay there, right? But I think just the idea of like, what's the most simple way that I can convey this thought to the point where it doesn't make sense anymore. Like if you can cut out the words until it sounds like you're a cave person, okay, then add 1 word back in, and then you can kind of get to that point where it's a little bit more clear and concise. And then try to focus on what are those core stories. You don't need to tell 10 stories, but what are the 2 to 3 that you can tell that most richly show what it is that you're trying to share about yourself. That usually helps people just trying to tie those pieces together. And then I'm trying to make sure I'm answering the full question. So a clear connection between their past experiences and future plans. Yeah, I think it's been said a few times, but just what are the things you've done so far that have demonstrated the steps you've already taken to where you want to go, and how will this school be a catalyst or an accelerant to help you get there?
Yeah, I think you covered it. And not to pitch too hard, but honestly, with this question, use a coach. I understand that coaching is expensive, and different people will be able to use a coach different amounts. But even if you're just going to get 1, 2, or 3 revision cycles, this is something that folks like Ben and Dion and Soa, this is their superpower, right? Being able to help you condense down that essay and capture the core heart of what you're trying to get at. And so it's one of the highest leverage parts of your application, where you can use a coach really to your advantage, I would say. Let's move on to the next question here. What are some common mistakes or pitfalls that applicants should avoid when writing their application essays? And I'd love to hear from Ben and Dion on this one, particularly around clients that you've worked with and experiences that you've seen given your illustrious careers as coaches so far.
I think one macro pitfall is starting too late on these essays. I think getting an early start and just quickly getting iterations on paper, I can't emphasize it enough. So before we even talk about the actual content, I think that a process where you are starting early, and if you're working with a coach, or if you're doing this on your own, like having a regular cadence for yourself for times that you're just going to sit down and do focused writing. Like anything else, like how are you going to get work done in like insert job here? You kind of need periods where you're going to be sitting and doing dedicated work behind that. So I think that is a critical component of making sure that your ultimate final product is as good as it can be. In terms of the actual writing stuff, I think there's a pitfall of you try to say everything and therefore say nothing. Really keep your narratives focused. Like if your admissions reader can sum up your essay in 3 words and assign you a tagline, you've done a good job. If they're kind of like, oh, well, they talked a little bit about this and they're clearly passionate about some other thing, and then they also spent some time doing blah, blah, it's like, all right, you're clearly all over the place, or like you're doing some kind of like resume drop within the essay. I think focus is key. And I love the points as well around like speak softly and plainly and in a way that's very understandable. So all of those things I would emphasize from a stylistic and a content perspective too.
What are your thoughts, Dion?
I definitely agree with everything Ben and Soa said. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have specifics, because a lot of times what people do when they're not sure of themselves or they haven't done adequate reflection, they start to spin a lot of words, and at the end, it not only is hard to understand and take a lot of word count, but it kind of reveals that the writer may not have really known what they're talking about. I just reiterate some of the other things that were said before. Answer the question. I know people have a lot that they want to tell, but speaking as someone who's read applications, the question's there for a reason. And it's very frustrating if you're evaluating an application, the person seems great, the essay is beautiful, but they didn't answer the question. And they're not going to have time to, call you up and say, oh, I wish I had this clarification, or maybe we'll just interview them because we'll find out. No, you will probably go into the not sure or deny pile because they have other people who have done a better job. I could think of let's say 5 C's. Your essay must be clear. It must be concise. It must be compelling. cohesive and credible. On the point of credible, that goes in part to having confidence, believing in yourself, and having done the research. If you're not confident, it will show up in your writing, it will show up in your interview. And so you owe it to yourself to do the work. And I agree that, even I love to write, but it's not easy. But there are two parts of a strong essay. One is, what are you going to write, and how are you going to communicate it? I can't really emphasize enough the what. The what is so important. I work with applicants from all over the world. Their English may not be their first language. Most people say they don't love to write, much less write about themselves. That's not the essential qualification for a strong essay. It's really being willing to do the work, to be open, to do the reflection, and then working through as many drafts as it takes, not coming with a one and done, or looking at your consultant saying, who am I? What should I write? What do they want to know? Even when you work with a consultant, you as the applicant are you're the owner. You need to feel good about it.
Great responses. Thank you, both of you. I'm going to have to remember those 5 C's, Dion. And if I could also add a pitfall here, being a coach myself who also happens to teach a class on this subject where half of the workshop is dedicated to common mistakes and pitfalls, I'll just throw one into the mix. And one common pitfall that I see is not making the essay about you. And I see this one in sneaky ways because, we're talking a lot about your career aspirations and your goals and your past experiences and these influences and how they've shaped you, right? And maybe one of those influences is, the fact that your parents were immigrants, or that, you were exposed through a brother to the healthcare industry, right? Or maybe one of your goals is founding a company. And one common pitfall that I see is making the essay about those stories and not about you, right? It's absolutely okay to talk about your let's say your parents and the impact they had on you, but the focus needs to be on how it impacted you and how it changed you, right? If you want to found an ed tech company, that's great. This isn't a VC pitch, right? You're not trying to sell GSB on why they should invest in your startup, right? It's, why does that matter to you? And why are you the leader who's going to make that difference, who's going to found that company and change the world, right? Why you? So that's a very common pitfall that I see. And thank you both, Ben and Dion. Let's move on. And Dion, I'm actually going to get back to you with this one. Given your 10 years as an admissions coach, can you share some successful examples of unconventional or innovative approaches to MBA application essays that have impressed admissions committees?
Well, I'll give some general categories. One, I love working with clients because I get to learn something from them about their industries or professions or countries every time. And speaking as someone who has read applications, it is very exciting when you get to be surprised or when you get to learn something yourself. So I've had clients work in unusual industries that really pique my interest. And so they'll say they can start off, Bennett spoke about a hook, a statement or a discovery that is really intriguing or provocative or really important. Another technique is to take people into, this is often used, I think, in college application essays. I do college application admissions consulting as well, is take them into like a pivotal time, a pivotal experience. What was it like? How did you feel? So that the reader can, have an emotional connection. The other things, it can range from a quirky story that had meaning to kind of like, I'm like a big fan of the Lord of the Rings series, the movies, and I like for people to think of themselves in like the arc of a hero's story. You don't have to be like an amazing, I saw it in the chat, an Olympic athlete or founder of a unicorn. There can be very real, very human experiences that you've encountered. And what's important is, what did you do and why? And carry that story arc through. Everybody loves a good story.
So, or Ben, any unconventional or innovative approaches that either of you have seen?
I took one myself, which I share my essay among my class I did, and like I just started off and wrote my entire intro as like a short story. So like I just kind of jumped into a scene in a way that I think like it was written like very much like you might pick up like a book, and like it just starts telling a thing. So I think that was a little bit less conventional, and I kind of had a very much like a screw it approach. Like if they don't like this, like I truly had no idea what they wanted, and that ignorance almost helped me. So I was like, this is very me. And so I was trying to show them both through my actual style and approach who I was, in addition to the actual specific content that composed the essay. So that, I think, a little bit unconventional. Other things, I mean, like, I think there's so much room for like non-conventionality within your narrative. There's just so much nuance to life, and there are so many things that happen to people. And like the amount of essays I've read where I just had to stop and be like, what? And I literally have never heard of a human having this experience before. So I think don't necessarily feel pressure, but if you have an idea, this is also another great reason to actually get a coach, honestly, because you can kind of run it by them or run it by a second set of eyes and be like, is this kind of ridiculous, or is this clever, or is this interesting, or is this nuanced? This is a cool way to do things. So there's a too far approach, but there's also probably some wiggle room.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one client I worked with who, an early draft of their essay, they kind of wrapped up quoting this oh my gosh, this Persian, that's the word I was looking for. They were quoting a Persian poet at the end of their essay, and we ended up reworking it so that the essay started off with this stanza of poetry that then introduced the theme that she then kind of harkened back to and interwove through her essay. It was a beautiful essay. She was a dual admit at both Harvard and Stanford. So that's one unconventional approach. Another unconventional approach I've seen is kind of having different, like almost like stories in italics that then a paragraph follows that like relates that experience. So kind of similar to Ben's short story, where they're actually describing in the moment something that happened, and then they jump back into essay mode. Again, as Ben said, don't feel pressure to try an unconventional or innovative approach. But if you are a bit more creative, if you do lean that way, just know that it's on the table. Know that it is an arrow in your quiver, right? But don't feel pressure. Okay, what advice do you have for applicants who may have experienced setbacks or challenges in their academic or professional journeys, right? Maybe a class that didn't go well, a GPA that's lower, laid off from a job, they were working in cryptocurrency. How can they address these situations in their essays while maintaining a positive and forward-looking perspective? So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so what's nice about a lot of the schools you'll be applying to is there is usually an optional essay really for this, just to kind of show what are those things that you've done to counterbalance any potentially like things that might be seen as weaknesses. So if, for example, maybe you were really, really strong in one half of your test, but maybe the quant didn't go so well. Have you taken classes outside of that might showcase that you do have those skill sets, or done work in your job that might have that skill set as well? But really emphasizing on, here's all the things that I've done. So if this is, it's kind of thinking about yourself as how do you de-risk yourself as an applicant, and can you kind of show some of the things that you've done to de-risk yourself? So if you think that some things are perceived weakness, just emphasize the strengths that counterbalance that, and show where you have actually shown that thing that the schools are looking for. But that's usually in the optional essay, where that can become a part of it, or also you can just kind of show it in your resume and your short answers showing these places where you do have strengths where there might be a question mark still in your full application.
Amazing. Well, we are coming up on time. Any parting advice, if you could leave our participants with one last tip that maybe we haven't covered or gotten to. If any of you have something that comes to mind, feel free to unmute and share it with the group.
I would just say give yourself time. Give yourself time to really tell the story that you feel is you on paper. You never want to be in a situation where you feel rushed or you feel like this is, yes, my story, but not the way I wanted to tell it. So just give yourself time and space, and that will just give you the chance to really showcase yourself in the best light.
Especially as we're coming up on July, right? And that round one deadline is looming. Obviously, it's great to apply round one if you can, but make sure that you're putting your best foot forward in your application. That's what matters most. And if you need another month to figure out that essay and make sure that you're showing the best version of yourself to the admissions committee, take it and apply round two. That's always the advice that I give folks. If they're just, if you can't quite pull it together in time. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dion, Ben, and Soa. This has been a fantastic session. I feel like I've learned a lot and I've learned so much from each of you. So thank you for your advice. And thank you to all of the participants who have joined this. If you want to get coaching from Leland, Dion, Ben, Soa, you can find all of their profiles on the Leland website and through the marketplace. You can also sign up using the QR code for Leland Plus, which will get you discounts on coaching, as well as access to an exclusive content library, example applications, templates, and more. And on that note, we will leave you all. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of your evening, wherever you are in the world.